Welcome to Real Life in Homeschool. My name is Jana Cook, and I'm the community manager for Bookshark. Today, I'm joined with Kara Anderson, author of More Than Enough. We're going to be talking today about her book, but more specifically, some of the challenges that homeschool parents face, including but not limited to expectations that we put on ourselves, comparisons that we do with other people, fear that we naturally have, and maybe some guilt. Kara, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here and talk to you. Thank you for having me.
Before we get started into the meat of your book and some of the topics that I think are really going to encourage homeschool parents as they are starting their journey again this year, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am a homeschool mom to two kids. We're going into our 14th year of homeschooling. So I'm really only homeschooling one, which is very weird because my son is 17 and he started taking college classes and he's working with a Japanese tutor. So he's kind of doing his own separate thing from us. So this is going to be a whole new experience teaching high school to one. And I write over at karasanderson.com. And I'm half of the Homeschool Sisters, the Homeschool Sisters Podcast. And my new book is out now. It's available on Amazon and it's in paperback and in Kindle versions. And there is an audiobook coming soon.
Well, I'm excited we're doing a giveaway for those who are watching. There's a link on the landing page that you guys can enter to win a copy of Kara's book. And once you hear what she has to say, I'm sure that you will try to enter to win that, but also run out and get a copy because it was very encouraging to me in particular. And I know to our audience will really enjoy it as well.
Oh, thank you so much.
Before we even go a little bit further, why don't you just tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write the book?
I had been thinking about for a while that I get a lot of emails, direct messages, people with the podcast, and they reach out. And one of the things that I think most commonly I hear is this worry that they're not doing enough. And I feel that too. I talk in the book how I had some stops and starts along the way with homeschooling. And I actually quit once. And I quit because, interestingly, I think I was trying to do too much, but it felt like I wasn't doing enough. And so when I sat down and started writing it, this stuff poured out. And one of the things that came out was that your love for your kids is more than enough to homeschool well. And all of a sudden I thought, okay, wait, yeah, I think parents need to hear that because we take so much on ourselves, so much responsibility, so much guilt, so much worry, sometimes. And if we can just stop for a minute and remember that we love these kids more than anything. And the reason that we worry so much is because we love them so much. So that love is going to see us through, even when it's hard.
And hard it is, and hard it continues to be. And so, for our audience who maybe this is their second year, maybe they felt like they had to homeschool last year because of the pandemic, and now they're coming up to another year. And even as we speak, things are changing, guidelines are changing, mandates are changing. Right. And so I feel like maybe even those who unexpectedly homeschool, but were ready to put their kids back in this year are finding themselves once again in this place of, what decision do I make? And to remember that love is what it fuels us, I think is so important because there is no wrong decision. And we're doing the best we can, knowing that we want the best for our kids. And so I always like to encourage those who I talk to, like, take a deep breath. You have permission to just give yourself some space and know that it's all going to work out okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really feels, especially I think for those parents that are making that decision of, do we go back to school or do we keep the kids home for another year or what? There's no way. I mean, what a lot of us, even the ones who have been at it for forever, realized this year is that we don't have as much control as we thought we did, Like you can make these grand plans. You can say, this is the year we're going to really dive deep into, World War II history, or my kids are definitely going to learn all of the state capitals this year or whatever. And then it's like curveball, and everything has changed. And so it's hard though, I know, for those parents who are sort of trying to decide, will I be able to do it? Will I be enough to, see my kids, this year, help them through this year? And, it's overwhelming, it's scary, and I don't think there is any one right decision, which makes it so much harder too. There's so many variables, but love, it all comes back to that love. And I think as long as you have that, it's going to be okay. We're not going to let our kids, we're not going to let them fail. We're not going to let anything too important fall through the cracks. And it's kind of amazing when you've been at this for a while, you start to realize that there's a lot of things you kind of can let fall through the cracks, some of like the really elaborate art projects or the really crazy hands-on science, or, the things that you see on Instagram or whatever, and think all the homeschoolers are doing that. Like, we're really not.
Mm-mm.
Okay. You don't have, there's so much that you don't have to do to homeschool well.
I'm feeding my children and keeping them alive.
Right. Yeah.
like goal one and goal two. Nailing it.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that leads us to your first point of expectations. As homeschool parents, new and seasoned, I think we have this idea that we do have to do it all. We have to have the amazing floor-to-ceiling volcano that erupts at the perfect timing, and at the same time, a replication of Van Gogh that our children worked on. That's a mural in the living room. And oh, by the way, we created a 5-course meal for dinner every night this week. Like, it's just this unrealistic life of a homeschooler that I think because of Instagram, Facebook, all of these social media platforms, which are wonderful, they kind of overwhelm us with what we should be doing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's really easy to get in our heads that all the homeschoolers are doing these things because we scroll, right? And then we see the one mom that's cooking the 5-course meal, and we see the mom that's like redecorating her whole house, and then we see the volcano, and we see the hands-on art thing, and we see, all these things, and it starts to get in our head that this is what homeschooling is that these are what the good homeschool moms or dads are doing. And really, it's so much about trade-offs. It's like, I always say, it's like invisible balls, like nobody is keeping all the invisible balls in the air. The mom that's really, really good at doing art with her kids, maybe she really studied, getting a little personal here. Maybe she really stinks at nature study, like I love doing art projects with my kids. I am not good at nature study. Never have been. I'm allergic to a lot of nature. I get lost easily. Like, it's just not my thing. So I wish that we saw more of that out there. The parents that were saying like, this is what I like to do, and this is what my kids like to do. And so this works really well for us. But I also, hire out a math tutor, or I make sure that I have a curriculum that really provides everything I need for X, Y, or Z. So I don't have to try to come up with that on my own. And nobody is actually doing it all, but for some reason we think we're supposed to. And it's just, we're so hard on ourselves. We would never look at another mom that was like, gosh, we haven't done any artist study all semester. And, we would never say to her, well, get it together. How are your kids ever going to learn that or something? We would never say that, but we'd beat ourselves up about stuff like that. And there's always time. That's one of the gifts of homeschooling. There's always time. You can always do it later, or you can realize that that's just not something that you've ever really needed anyway in your homeschool.
I don't know if I just have an amazing memory for all things unnecessary. But when I went to school, I went to a private school. Well, I homeschooled, I went to a private school, I went to a public school. So I feel like I've run the gamut of education. And mind you, it's been a long time and things have changed, but I don't think they've changed that much in the fact that I don't remember getting through the whole math book when I was in school. I don't remember, having a spectacular science every single day. Like it's like we feel like almost maybe we have to prove ourselves because we've made this decision. And really, we've proven ourselves just by making the decision, right? We said, this is what we're going to do. Right. And this is our decision. And so, I don't know where this unrealistic expectation comes in with education. I think that we kind of carry it all as moms, as dads, as coworkers, as friends. Like it's just human nature, I think. But for some reason, I feel like it gets, it's like on steroids for homeschool parents.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah. And I think that's what it is. Like we've taken this on our shoulders, right? So it's like, this is my child's education. This is huge. I never want to do anything that's going to limit what they can do in the future. So I need to prepare them for everything. But then, like you said, it's, we had a science fair once a year. That's when we did like the big, cool hands-on science thing. The rest of the time it was like, reading from the textbook. Right. And it's like,
watching a lot of those video, like the reels, right? The films, but the projector would come in and everyone would get excited because they knew the teacher was not going to be standing up there talking anymore. Like, I think that's the kind of, I love finding documentaries for my daughter and I, I'm like you, I'm only homeschooling my youngest this year again. And so we went from 3 to 1 and that's been a really interesting transition, but I love like, hey, let's get on and see what nature thing we can watch because, other people have done things so much better than I have. So let's find the ones that do it well. And then I can do well what I'm, gifted at, which is loving you and making sure that, you get the hug when you're kind of in a bad mood. And I want to lecture you, but I need to remind myself to hug you because that's really what you need.
You need cheese and crackers and a hug, and I'm just going to walk out of the room slowly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. I love that you said that like, that's your job is to love your kids because, first of all, if what we wanted was for somebody else to like have all these specialized degrees and know how to teach each individual subject, we would have put our kids in school. Right. So instead, what we're doing is we're keeping them home, but we're still mom or dad. Like we're not supposed to be these professors of everything who can just impart wisdom all day long. A lot of it comes down to finding resources that work well for your individual family and then realizing this is working, this is good, and this is actually enough. Like we don't have to do what everybody else is doing. And I do this thing, I started doing it a few years ago where I write down, if I see something that's really cool online, I write it down and I call it my big picture planning page, my BPPP, and I write it down. And I talk about this in the book where it's like, oh, how cool would that be to like, I don't know, do a paper mache, like whatever. And so I write it down and then I have it there. And then if like that month, I'm like, I really don't want to do paper mache. I can just move it to the next month. I do like a monthly planning page. And then if it stays on there a few months, I'm like, I don't think I actually want to do paper mache. I think it just looked really cool that somebody else did it. And like, maybe the best thing I could do is just like call my child over and be like, look at what these people made. Isn't that cool? And then if she's like, oh, I really want to do paper mache, that's one thing. But otherwise we can just be like, those people are good at those things and we do other things and that's fine. That's okay. You don't have to, where we got this idea, that we have to like do it all and be it all and just keep running like hamsters on a wheel forever until we collapse. No, we need to stop and just have fun sometimes and just enjoy being with our kids.
I find it very frustrating when I get excited about something and then I start planning it and maybe just planning in my head, not even necessarily, I haven't even really put any energy into it except in my own head. And believe me, that is a lot of energy for me. And then I present it to my daughter and she's like, no. I'm like, and I instantly, I want to be upset. And I have to remind myself, you didn't even do anything yet. Like, good thing you talked to her, because right. I had this elaborate plan in my head and it was going to be so amazing. And really that was about me. That was about me wanting to do something. And then sometimes I just do it by myself because I was so excited, but I forget that the education is about her. And that's been something I've just been finding over the last year with her just being home by herself, is like, wow, so many of the times when I'm getting frustrated with my child, it's my expectation. It's not anything to do with my child. And I'm so sick of having to change myself because I'm a homeschool parent, but I pray that in the end, it makes me a better person all around. But it's like this big lesson that I keep coming back to. And it's interesting how many of those things in homeschool end up, that's the source, at least for me.
Yeah, I think you make a good point though, that sometimes you do the things. Like if you see something and you're like, oh, look at those really cute cookies, you can just make the cookies. And it's like, it would be great if you wanted to make the cookies. But I have this post over at my site called Cheerful. I always do this. It's called Cheerful Nonchalance. And it's all about how, I don't know if you guys do strewing at all in your homeschooling. Strewing is just the idea of like putting out educational things in your kid's path and like letting them sort of discover it and interact with it however they want. But the key I figured out a long time ago is to have like zero expectations that they're going to actually do it. So you have to keep like the cost low, the investment low, the mental investment low. But, like you just put out a bird book and you're like, and then if they pick it up and they're like into it, then you go like, all right, now I'm going to buy a bird feeder, and then you put the bird feeder out with some bird seed and then but anyway, the whole thing is, you have to keep your own expectations in check, because otherwise it's going to be like, it's bird week. And your kids are going to be like, birds? I wanted to study dinosaurs. Like, yeah. So
I'd come home with the library. Our library lets you check out like different backpacks with one of them is bird watching. And so you can get like the parks pass and the bird book and the binoculars. And so so I'd come home with like a safari ready to go. And my daughter would be like, yeah, I'm really not feeling that. That's a great idea. First, put the bird book out and see if there's even any interest, because otherwise I've already planned an entire weekend of, finding this one bird in Colorado that no one's seen in 100 years. and then she's just not interested. And then I'm frustrated. And then she's like, why are you always mad at me? It's like, why can't you be who I want you to be? And then
seriously, my friend told me once the key to happiness is low expectations. And I was like, that's the most depressing thing I've ever heard. And then I realized, but she's kind of right. Like, it's like if you plan a trip and you're like, and we're going to do a million things, everybody's going to have so much fun and everyone's going to get along. And then the in-laws are going to show up and it's not going to be awkward and weird and everything's going to be great. And, and you put like these huge expectations, you're just setting yourself up for like, but if you're kind of like, saying it would be cool to go to, wherever, and let's look at some of the things to do there and what's everybody feel like doing today, but it's hard, so hard. And that's basically homeschooling on repeat, right? Is like, let's do this. And your kid's kind of being like, And then you're like, okay, what do you want to do? They're like, I want to bake a pie. Okay, fractions, I guess. I don't know,
I think that is part of embracing a successful homeschool, maybe, is when you think about education in a public school, it's the administrators tell the teachers, and then the teachers tell the students. And then there's creativity and some individuality in that, but it's not student-led. And when I first was homeschooling, and even now when I hear student-led, I kind of cringe. I'm like, oh, my child would lead me nowhere, but but maybe on the couch to watch yet another episode of some ridiculous Disney show. And so, but what we're talking about is very student led. We're just listening and we're getting their input. And it's not that they're never going to have to do math because they're just not led in that direction, right? It's that,
Right.
okay, if we are working on fractions, what are they interested in to make that fraction a little bit more enjoyable? And when you see your kids having fun with any type of education, really, any type of learning, for me, that's what makes it all worth it. We're like, okay, yes, this is why we do this. But when I find that there's just kind of drudgery in our day, it's because I'm not letting her lead. I'm trying to lead, and then she's like not really following. And I keep looking back and she's, not behind me. And I wonder why it's not working.
Yeah, I know. I always say like the sweet spot of homeschooling is when you like what you're doing and your kids like what you're doing. But I mean, this is like, it's like an eclipse. Like, how often does that happen? So, but you look for those things. I think that's the goal, is to look for those places where you like it and your kids like it. And when you're not experiencing that, and it's going on for a long time, like, you have a certain math that you're doing, or you're having something else. Like, I think one of the greatest benefits of homeschooling is that you can say, okay, this isn't working. Like, I remember once I Googled homeschool math curriculum, and it came up with like some insane number. I can't even remember what it was, like 1 point something million in like 0.24 seconds. Like, it came up with all these ideas for homeschool math curriculum. So it's like, there's always something else out there that you can try if it's really, really not working and really, really affecting your relationship with your kids. And because that's the most important thing, right? Like, that's really the reason a lot of us do this, is because we wanted to focus on our relationships with our kids and their overall well-being, not just their education.
So I think that moves us seamlessly into this idea of comparison. So my child is different than your child, and your daughter is different than your son. And we have this natural tendency, again, and just in our human nature. So it's not anything that we need to be ashamed of. I think we just need to be aware of it. How do you feel that comparison can really take the joy out of homeschooling?
I think one of the biggest things it does is it takes our focus away from our actual wonderful, weird, quirky, goofy little sweet families. I mean, we all have, without even trying, our family culture, or whatever you want to call it. Whether it's you really like watching silly shows together, or everybody's kind of quiet and we all really just like reading in separate corners, or we like playing games, or you're a sports family, or whatever it is about you that makes you unique. Like, that's where the beauty is, really. But then we see all this other stuff and it just becomes a distraction away from our kids. And the whole idea is they're these unique beings, and we have the opportunity to give them a unique education. And instead, we get all distracted trying to give them some other education that looks perfect in the little tiny Instagram squares. And we don't even know that person's life. We don't even know. And half the time, the person on Instagram is probably, I mean, you and I know this, they're probably getting paid to post half of it. So who knows if their kids really love those like Montessori sand trays or not, or if it's like, listen, I need you to look happy doing this for 5 minutes so I can get some good photos.
I promise you ice cream when we're done. I promise.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I mean, that's the thing, like, not to make too much fun of people doing that. It's just that we have to keep that in mind. We're constantly being marketed to. And it's a new, like, kind of low level, sneaky marketing. It's not like the McDonald's commercial on TV where it's like, that cheeseburger looks delicious. It's like, this person who seems to have it all together really likes McDonald's cheeseburgers. Maybe you should try a McDonald's cheeseburger, except the McDonald's cheeseburger is whatever math curriculum or whatever science or whatever, thing that they happen to be kind of endorsing. So we just have to be smart about it, because we get to do what works for our family, as long as we're not sort of running around grabbing every different little bright, shiny thing that looks fun and interesting for other people.
I know in our family, my husband and I did a little bit of sports when we were in maybe middle school. Neither of us did it in high school or college. And so sports, although we enjoy watching it, it's not anything that we actively engaged in our adolescence. And so we're in a community where sports is so big from like, barely out of diapers, you got your kid in something. And part of us was like, man, did we mess up by not doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And now one of our twins decided that she wants to try to play volleyball. And so she's going in and as a sophomore to a high school that she doesn't attend, and she's going to be trying out. And I know people are like, what are you guys doing? Like, she should have been playing for at least 10 years now. And even some of her friends who have been playing, I can hear their conversations. And I feel like there's this little bit of pressure, like, oh, I don't know, maybe you'll make it. I don't know. I'm just like, you know what? If she doesn't, like, first of all, she's learning how to take a risk in a safe place. Yeah. And she's exploring something that, she may or may not stay with for a long period of time. But I am so excited and proud of her for doing this big thing that so many people wouldn't have done. And while I battle with those feelings of, though so-and-so had their kids doing this already, and maybe I shouldn't, I just have to just embrace the fact that we didn't. And I know that she'll do her best, and whatever that outcome is, we'll go with it. But it is hard not to compare when it is just blaring at you, social media, your community, your friends, your family. It's like tuning that out. You have to be so intentional about doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes with, don't you feel like it comes with time to some extent? Like, I feel like it was worse when my kids were younger, and I would see all the things and I would think, oh, that's what you're supposed to do to be a good mom. Like, you have to do X, Y, Z. And now, I'm in my 40s and I'm kind of like, I don't really want to do like my kids with sports. They never really played sports, and now I'm kind of like, I'm kind of glad that I don't have to go every weekend and drive somewhere really far away to do sports. But if they would have wanted to, we would have figured out a way to work it out. But yeah, we put so much pressure on ourselves, thinking that everybody else somehow like has it figured out, that they got the magical manual that was like, this is how to raise a successful, happy, healthy child. And again, how many parenting books are there out there? If somebody had written the one manual for it, that we would have heard of it, right? So
yeah, we would be talking about it right now, but we're not. We're talking about your ideas and how people can glean from them. That's going to help them in their homeschool, which I think is important. And knowing that, it's just like you mentioned, time. People make time for the things that are important to them. And in our household, it was always very important that we all sat down at the dinner table together when my husband got home from work. And so that kind of pushed aside the idea of being involved in a sport or even something outside of the home, especially when they were younger, because when do parents have time to do that? It's after work. And so we made that decision, and for better or for worse, I'll let you know if she makes the team, but and maybe she goes on and has a college scholarship, who knows, but there's been stranger stories, right? People pick up things later on in life. I want this idea of all or nothing for us just to let that go. Like we don't have to have felt like we missed the boat. Well, I'm sorry, we didn't get you started at 3. So now you can't play at 16. That's just not possible. Like, it is possible, and you can still have fun and enjoy things. But I think that starts with you and I as parents, modeling that for our kids as well. Like, oh, instead of living, I never wanted to talk about regret with my children because I didn't want to have this legacy of regret. I'm like, well, I did that. Wasn't my best decision, but I moved on from it. Or I didn't do that, but now I want to, and it's not too late. I can still learn how to do that. I can still do that now, so that they don't have to feel like so much pressure that if they made the wrong choice, parents like, we made the wrong choice in curriculum and now my child's not going to be a scholastic mathematician. I don't know, like, we missed the boat. You didn't miss the boat. There's no boat and there's no time schedule. And there's not even tickets to it.
No. And things have changed so much. I think I read recently, the average person changes careers like 11 times or something. And I always think like what we're doing right now, if somebody would have come to us in high school and been like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I would be like, oh, well, like, we'll just talk to people on like, it's sort of like a TV, and like, then it'll just get sent to all these people and they'll just be able to watch it. And there'll be, or we'll record our voices and we'll have like these like radio shows, but they're not really, they're podcast, like those didn't even exist. So we don't really know exactly what we're preparing our kids for anyway. So the things that I think are so important are a lot of times not the academic parts. It's like you said, the dinner around the table. It's modeling for them, trying something brave like your daughter did. And then she knows that she has the support either way. It's like being that safe place for our kids, for them to be themselves and for them to say, I'm going to try this. And then decide, like my son once upon a time decided he wanted to play the trumpet, and he tried it for a little while. And then he was like, I just really don't think I want to do the trumpet, but like he plays guitar and he used to play piano and now he's getting into drums and things like that. So like giving our kids a chance to fail, but in a safe place where they're not comparing themselves to other people, where we just tell them like, you know what? Yeah, that's awesome that your friends are like super into soccer or whatever. That's awesome. Good for them. We can go to their games sometimes and cheer them on, but you don't have to play soccer in order to like be a successful person. You can take your own path and like, let's figure out that path. Cause how cool is that they just, can be in this place of unconditional love where we just help them figure out what they're good at. And maybe they don't need a crazy amount of math to do what they want to do, cause that's the thing. Like I was thinking with my oldest, he, technically started college classes when he was 16. So we didn't follow that like standard 4 years of high school math. And I got all nervous about it. And then I realized, but they teach math in college too. So like if he wants to do that, it's still there. Not to mention, he could probably just like find a million different resources and apps and things online that could help him learn too. So yeah, we don't have to keep comparing ourselves to other people or the little squares. Don't have to keep comparing our kids. Oh my goodness. I mean, what a gift it is, I think, when we can just let people be 100% themselves, our kids and us too, as much as we can without getting nervous about it.
Well, I think when we're willing to let go of the comparison, we can see what's driving that a lot of times is fear, right? We're afraid. We're afraid that because I didn't start my daughter in this sport younger, that she's not going to do as well now. And now I'm afraid that I've messed it up for her. I'm afraid that if I pick the wrong homeschool curriculum and my child doesn't do well and we lose a year, then she's going to be behind. Like, I feel like fear is such a big motivator in all of these things that we're talking about. And how do we get out of that space?
Right. Yeah. It's kind of constantly playing in the background, isn't it? Like a sad little angry song. Like we always are dealing with that little bit of fear, that little bit of like, again, it's the responsibility that we've taken on. We can't just be like, well, she just had a really bad math teacher this year. It's not my fault, because it kind of is on us. And that's like, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot to carry around. And so I think looking to love and acting from love is always going to be more powerful than fear. Now, I'm not saying that's easy at all. I talk a lot about like waking up at 3:00 in the morning. I feel like I have an elephant on my chest. It's like, one of the things was high school transcripts, how am I going to get those made? And now we're doing them. And I'm like, that wasn't so bad. But I think when the fear starts to take over, one of the best things we can do, a lot of times I do take social media off like my phone and stuff for a little while when I'm just feeling really overwhelmed, and then I'll put it back on. It's not a big deal. You don't have to be like, I'm leaving, and you don't have to like an airport, like announce your departure. It's like, no, I'm just, I'm going to step away and I'm going to focus on my kids. And then when I look at my kids in front of me, I'm like, they're doing great. They're kind and they're pretty good to each other for siblings, and they're happy and they're figuring things out and we're figuring things out. So yeah, removing some of that comparison for sure, and then just going back to the idea that I love these kids so much. Like, I am not going to let them, if they need to complete some sort of random credit or whatever, like, we're going to figure it out. My son wanted to learn Japanese. I was like, there's absolutely no way. There's 3 alphabets. I'm like, no, there's no, we found this amazing tutor that he works with, and they've got like this little mentorship partnership thing that like, he wouldn't have had that if I would have been like, no, I'm going to make myself learn Japanese and get really good at it. Instead, he has this like great teacher and person in his life now. So it's hard though. It's hard to let the fear go, but just whenever you get too scared, just looking at your kids and remembering like, I'm their mom. I'm not their computer programmer. They're not little robots. They're just kids that need a hug and a snack tray.
I find that if I just will maybe even just say out loud my worst fear when I wake up in that 3:00 in the morning and my mind is racing. I don't get the tight chest. I get the racing mind. And then it's like, oh my gosh, now I know I'm up. Now I'm not going to get back to sleep. I'm like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? Right? Like, they finish high school a year later. Okay, well, you could call that junior college. They don't want to drive until they're 18. Well, now I'm saving money in my insurance. They didn't make the volleyball team, but now we can take that college course that you were really interested in that was going to conflict with it. So I find like once I connect with that love and I know that I want to do the best for them, when I call out that worst case scenario, and then my fix-it brain comes in and says, okay, but what does it look like? And it's so weird because I'm an optimist as well. So it's like, oh yeah, that horrible thing happened, but ding, which really is kind of dark-minded that I could even go to the most horrible thing that could happen. But then like this other personality inside me is like, but Jana, that means this. And I don't know, it may not work for everybody. And I'm not talking about like serious anxiety, but when I just have those things that just kind of grate on me as a mom, like, what am I as a parent? How did I mess that up today? Or, okay, what's the worst that could happen because I didn't let them go to that thing that they really wanted to go to, just talking that through. And my one daughter is always like, why do you talk to yourself? If I didn't, you would not want to see the mess that this would become. Like, I need to get that out. And I encourage that in my children, because I don't know if your kids are like this when they're stressed about something and they're holding it all in, it's like, you can physically see how it's making them like shut down. And it's like, no, speak it out. Use your words. Like, it's like we're back to the toddler, like, use your words. But it's so important because something about getting that out, it almost breaks the power it has at the same time, because it's like, okay, that was ridiculous, wasn't it? And it's like, no, we don't have to make it ridiculous. But do you hear now that that thing that was causing you so much stress actually has a solution or an alternative?
Right. Yeah. And so much of what we worry about never even comes to pass. Right. But yeah, and we all have our things that we carry with us that we're like, we know this is ridiculous. Like, they're not going to just fall in the river. It's like, it's fine if they go down to the festival, like, it's going to be fine. But like you said, giving it words and giving it some space, I think being able to be like, I am afraid of this. This is what I'm worried about. And like you said, it's so powerful to say, like, what's the very worst thing that's going to happen? Obviously, the falling in the river thing is a terrible example. But my kids are 14 and 17 and had swim lessons. So I think they're, but when we're talking about homeschooling stuff, like you said, like, oh my goodness, we don't get in the required number of years of like foreign language before technically they would graduate on this date. Like, I mean, it's so funny because we have this stuff stuck in our heads of kids graduate at 18 and then they have that summer and then they go away to college and that's just how it is. And if you're going to be successful, this is what you do. And then if you look at like other countries around the world, they don't do the same things. They don't have the same expectations. They don't have the same rules. I mean, Finland over there, they're the happiest people in the world, and their education system is like, so much different than ours. And I have to think there's a connection there. And yeah, so like, who makes the rules? Like, who's the boss? Who has to tell us that our kids can't take a gap year where all they do is catch up on a little bit of math, and maybe we research some different colleges and they, get a part-time job so that they can earn money or whatever. I mean, there's just getting out of that mindset and saying like, I don't have to play by these rules anymore. Like, that's really powerful because the thing is, homeschooling it's hard, right? There's a lot. We've taken on a lot on ourselves. So like, the places where we can take advantage of other things where it's, switching a particular curriculum that isn't working for one child, or saying, you don't have to do all of this freshman year. It's fine. We can put some of it in a different year, or things like that. We have a lot of freedom if we can just learn to embrace that and not be so driven by that fear and that comparison and all those expectations. They're not helping us at all. Like, if we can get rid of those, like, I just wrote this thing where I'm like, I don't think the hard part of homeschooling is actually the schooling as much as it's those things. It's like the expectation and the fear and the comparison and those things that tie us up. Sitting down with our kids and reading a book together isn't nearly as hard as the stuff that wakes us up at 3 a.m. and then trying to wake up the next day and be bright and perky and act like everything's normal, even though we're like, yeah, no, I'm fine. It's just everything fell apart in my brain last night. But no, it's okay. Let's just get started with math. That'll be fine.
Yeah, I wake up and be like, did you know the world ended at about 3 a.m.? Because that's how it felt in my mind when I was trying to figure out how I was going to get you to 2 places at once because we overscheduled you, and it's fine. It's going to be fine. But I think embracing these ideas of, what they are, what are the unrealistic expectations? Why are we comparing? What is the fear? What is motivating that fear? Right. I think when we look at all of those things, we call out what we feel guilty about, and maybe call a friend and just be like, am I crazy? I mean, typically the answer is yes when I call a friend and say that, but then we carry on a conversation like, okay, no, that's a legitimate concern, but what can we do about it? That would eliminate so much worry that we go to bed at night with, that maybe that's what is fueling the 3 a.m. wake up. And so many other things in our lives as parents. I know homeschooling is like, it's about the kids, it's about the curriculum. But if we as parents don't get on a good space we're going to have a less enjoyable homeschool year than maybe we could have. And it starts with knowing that you are more than enough, that you can do it. And I want to just thank you for writing your book. As a homeschool mom, it was so encouraging to read. I was rereading and finishing up the last bit yesterday, sitting next to my daughter, and I was kind of chuckling about a few things. And she was like, "Good book, huh?" And I was like, "It really was. It really was." So I hope that our listeners get a chance to, if you don't win a copy, that you go out and find it. We'll put a link in our page, because it was very encouraging just to know that you're going to be okay. And if this is your first year, second year, 10th year, it does not matter. I think as humans, we are never going to get off of this train of these things that we've talked about, but I think we can get a better handle on them when they come up in our day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they are silent, right? They're like, I mean, they distract us and they bother us, but they're not, it's really hard to stop and sometimes be like, oh, that was just comparison. I was just comparing myself to someone else there, or, oh, wait, that was just a fear that came up. Like, that's not realistic. So it's going to be okay. But we are so busy. And so it's really hard sometimes to stop our mind and call those things out and say, like, no, that's not a real problem. That's just me, like you said, trying to handle too many things and figure out how I'm going to get somebody to two places at the same time and not having a chance to slow down. And you talked about being intentional. And I think, we want to give our kids so much. We want to give them everything that we possibly can. But sometimes if we do less and we're more intentional about it, I think it can help us focus in on what's really important and just let a lot of that other stuff go. And that really, I think, is how to keep homeschooling sustainable, even if you're just doing it for this year, even if you're, just one more year and then we're going to put them back in school or whatever. I think that's the way to keep going without completely burning out by like October, which I've totally done. So
we've all been there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on and speaking with me today. I want to thank you guys who were able to come on and watch. Don't forget to look for the link to enter to win a copy of More Than Enough. And we'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Kara.
Thank you.